Hello everyone. So there's a few things I want to cover in this video. As I try to do with these sort of stories, I'm going to be quoting some news links, and as always, I'll put them in the information section of my video. Um, some of them are quite in depth, so I won't read those out. But I'm going to use one as a case study, let's say. But there's a few things I want to cover. Firstly, an unrelated story today was the news of a big aviation disaster in China. Now, my student actually told me about this. I teach a woman in Beijing, and she asked me had I heard the news, and I didn't. So this was a Boeing 747, China Eastern Airlines, from Kunming to Guangzhou. I've been to Guangzhou, Baiyun International Airport, the big airport, but the flight came down in Guangxi, which is the region. It's actually classed as a region as opposed to a province. Um, Between the two cities, that's unusual. But it looks like there's no survivors among the 132 on board. So it's the worst aviation disaster so far of 2022, and the worst civilian aviation accident for quite a while. Unless I'm mistaken, it's the worst civilian accident anywhere in the world since an Indonesian flight in January last year. So obviously there's going to be questions about what's happened with this very unusual situation for a flight to come down mid-flight like that. Whether it was sabotage, whether it was something more mundane like a bird getting in the propellers, or who knows what. Of course, with these things, it's always sad to see the families waiting news. It must be one of the most gut-wrenching experiences possible. So I really, my heart really goes out to those people because I can imagine what that's like. Um, yeah. So there's two things that are sort of related. So I want to cover them. I'll try and do this in a concise way, but I think it's a disgrace, and I think it reflects badly, frankly, on this country. And I say this with no unpatriotic sentiments, but we have to be honest about ourselves, and this just doesn't look good. So, first of all, our Prime Minister, um, Ukraine war, Boris Johnson sparked fury after comparison to Brexit. Now, this isn't a case of being taken out of context. I watched a speech, and basically, the first part was fine. Um, But basically, he said that Britons, like Ukrainians, had the instinct to choose freedom and cited the 2016 vote to leave the EU as a recent example. The comments have caused anger among politicians both in the UK and in mainland Europe. The report says, and Europe. I say mainland Europe. Donald Tusk, the former president of the European Council, called the comments offensive. Conservative peer Lord Barwell said voting in a referendum is not in any way comparable with risking your life in a war, while Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey said it was an insult to Ukrainians. Um, and the row comes as the Prime Minister strongly urged China to condemn the Russian invasion in an interview with the Sunday Times. He suggested Beijing was having second thoughts about its neutral stance. Well, he might be right about that. There is indications that Beijing is starting to change its stance, albeit slowly. But for the Prime Minister to compare this to Brexit is frankly vulgar. Um, there is simply no comparison between a democratic referendum and leaving an organisation voluntarily with no violence um, versus a larger neighbour violently invading a country, committing war crimes, causing a refugee crisis. There is just no comparison. There's no context that can be compared. And I think the Prime Minister was wrong to say it. But I think Johnson is a very cynical character. And I have to say, I have little time for this Prime Minister. Over time, I'm someone who's always sort of said it's an incredibly demanding job. I always want to give prime ministers the benefit of the doubt because they're under enormous pressure. They've the weight of a nation on their backs. So I want to be not blindly positive, but I want to be fair. With Boris Johnson, it's just one thing after another. I mean, the Partygate investigations have opened up again, or rather, the findings are going to be published soon. That does seem quite trivial compared to what's happened in Ukraine, but it has to be said that the Ukraine crisis has sort of saved Johnson in a sense because he was on the verge of facing a vote of no confidence, and now he gets to play the statesman. Except this was very unstatesmanlike. This was petty, inward-looking nonsense, and I think it was pitched to appeal to the Brexiteers in his party. But I would say to Brexiteers, no matter how strongly you feel about the EU, can you not see that such a comparison is just totally wrong? Whatever faults the EU has, the EU is not Putin's Russia. It's just not. And any sort of notion that it is in any way comparable is ludicrous. The EU can be bureaucratic. The EU can be arrogant. I don't like everything about the EU. But these sort of comparisons, you know, um, time and time again, we've been told that Remoaners, as it's been crudely, designated, need to accept democracy and move on. But time and time again, Brexiteers bring up this sort of rhetoric. Um, Turning Point UK recently had a similarly inappropriate comparison, trying to talk about how leaving the EU was somehow comparable to the situation in Ukraine. I took issue with that and I told them so. And I'm not, Turning Point UK is not, I wouldn't say they're a particularly extreme group. They're quite centre ground. They're Brexiteers, but from what I gather, they've always been relatively centre ground. So I was disappointed with that. I'd like their page because I thought, well, this is kind of I don't agree with them on everything, but this is the kind of sensible people. So for them to come out with that, forget the exact verbatim of the post that they made a few weeks ago, but it was similar and it was just totally inappropriate. Um, this hysterical sort of analogies that hardline Brexiteers love to make, they need to stop it because it is an insult to Ukrainians, and it's just false. There's no comparison between the EU and any dictatorship. There really isn't. People could dislike the EU. They could say it's arrogant. At times, it's even undemocratic. I'm certainly not saying it's a bald reproach. But for goodness sake, don't compare it to a brutal dictatorship that has launched a war on a smaller country, committed war crimes, created a humanitarian crisis, and put the security of a continent at risk. No comparison. Johnson should apologise, but of course he won't. Now, not entirely unrelated is his government's response to Ukrainian refugees. Um, Patel has talked about overhauling the system, but not much has changed. And I'm going to cite a case. There's a few reports that are linked to this, but they're quite in depth. So, for the sake of being concise, I'll just cite this one. Um, this is from the Doncaster Free Press. Doncaster couple's fury at Ukraine red tape shambles as they bid to host refugees. A Doncaster couple looking forward to welcoming refugees from the war in Ukraine into their home have hit out at the government's visa scheme as a shambles and an absolute nightmare. More than 10 million people in Ukraine are now said to have been displaced since the war began more than 3 weeks ago, with thousands hoping to seek refuge in the UK. Last week, the government announced its plans for people in Britain to be able to take in people fleeing Russia's brutal invasion. But the scheme has come in for criticism, including a Doncaster couple hoping to take in a Ukrainian mum and her children. Lee Havenhan, 33, and his wife Rebecca, 30, are preparing to share their three-bedroom home with a mother and two daughters. The couple, who live near Doncaster, were matched with the family through a Facebook site and were inspired to help after having visited Ukraine regularly for holidays. Engineer Mr. Havenhan said he helped a family from Lviv in western Ukraine with the visa process by filling in the required forms for them. But he added, "It's a good job we did it because the forms are an absolute nightmare. They took us 6 hours because of the amount of information and evidence that is required. It asked for children's birth certificates, which is a problem for many people who have already fled their homes. It also asked for proof of father's consent, which is not always possible if they have if he has gone off to fight in the war. It's a shambles. We just have to cross our fingers that it is going to go through soon. It comes as it was revealed that Ukrainian refugees waiting for UK visas are being forced to sleep rough amid anger over red tape delays. Under the first phase of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, Britons can sponsor refugees for a visa and offer them a rent-free room in their home, in their house. Once a host family has been found, refugees must complete visa application forms, providing identity documents and answers to detailed questions in English. There is then a further wait before the visa is issued, with government information saying the process can take up to 6 weeks. Um, and the other reports basically highlight the sort of thing happening as well. Um, a while back, I mentioned that there was a cartoon in the Times. I made a mistake about that. It wasn't in the Times, it was actually a cover on the Spectator magazine, which is a conservative magazine, but it was quite poignant. It showed various European leaders holding welcome signs to Ukrainian refugees. Then it showed Patel with a big long menu of criteria. Now, I'm not naive. I understand that you can't just let in thousands of people without checks, right? No matter how sentimental we are about the situation in Ukraine, I understand that there has to be checks, particularly involving children. For example, there should obviously be background checks if the house is suitable, if the hosts are suitable. Um, but I think that this is a classic case of British bureaucracy. Um, Not for the first time. I mean, the Windrush scandal and the hostile environment that the Home Office created really put people through enormous stress unnecessarily. I think it's a disgrace. What needs to happen is there needs to be far, far less red tape. The bureaucracy needs to be cut. I think it's a disgrace that we're the only country in Europe that hasn't waived visa restrictions. As far as I know, if I'm mistaken about that, please feel free to correct me. But as far as I know, we're the only country in Europe that hasn't waived visa restrictions for Ukrainians. And it's this, what angers me is this computer says no attitude. You need to have all this information available at hand, or you need to register. These people have fled a war zone, sometimes probably with hours to prepare. Um, they're fleeing Russian shelling. They're displaced people. They don't have the luxury of sitting down on the laptop and, planning everything out. And it's this utter failure to understand this sort of thing that I think is a disgrace, and the Home Office is showing callousness and just I think it's just showing itself to be out of touch. Patel can say that we're helping, but I think this is a disgrace, and I think so much for global Britain. It's embarrassing. But for anyone around the world looking at this, I would say, I mean, I saw a report in Thai the other day talking about this. Um, what I would say is that this is not symbolic of the generosity of the British people. There are many British people like this couple in Doncaster, in South Yorkshire, who want to help people. Britons have been extremely generous in terms of charity appeals for Ukraine. In fact, I understand we're among the most generous nations in that regard. So this is not about the British people being mean-spirited or looking inward. Indeed, British volunteers have joined the Ukraine Defence Forces, putting their lives on the line. British aid workers have gone out to Poland and other countries to help out. This is not representative of the spirit of the British people. I think it is representative of the bureaucracy of the British government and the infuriating red tape that people have to go through. There's going to be cases of people who maybe can host refugees, they're suitable and they want to do it, but they're put off by the sheer complexity of the process. Home Office should be making it more simple. They should be helping people, giving people advice, instead of just basically leaving them on their own. I understand there's a stipend of £350 that the government will give out, but there has to be more than that. They need to cut the bureaucracy, make the process a lot simpler, and just get rid of this computer says no attitude. It's pathetic. Um, and Johnson and Patel need to sort it out. There isn't really much more to say. I'll put links on the video, but I just think it's very sad that we have this attitude as a country. Well, like I said, it's not really the country, it's not the British people, but I'm not naive. I don't think that you should just have thousands of people coming in with no checks, right? Um, but I think there needs to be a recognition that people fleeing a war zone don't have the luxury of sitting down behind a laptop and, just like applying as if it's normal circumstances. That's not the situation here. The government needs to be a lot more compassionate and understanding of what these people are going through. Um, and to those who say, "Oh well, there's safe countries nearby," yes, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, those countries have really, really opened their arms. They have been incredible in terms of the support they have offered, and yes, they are the nearest safe countries. But it's not that simple. If someone has family in Britain of Ukrainian descent, why would they settle in Poland or Slovakia or the Czech Republic? It would make sense for them to want to join their family in Britain. So, people with that attitude, that's naive. Also, Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and so on, those countries have been incredible, but they can't take all the burden. So, I don't think it's good enough to say, oh, well, they're the nearest safe countries, let them handle it all. Um, I think we have a duty, you know, if post-Brexit Britain, it's supposed to be global Britain, let's prove it. Let's show compassion to people fleeing a war zone. Cut the damn bureaucracy. I mean, has the Home Office learned anything from the Windrush scandal? I'm not saying it's exactly the same situation, but it's the same sort of bureaucracy. Um, and I have to say, I do feel if Keir Starmer was Prime Minister and Labour was in government, I mean, I might be wrong, there's no way to prove that, but I do feel there would at least be more efforts to make this less bureaucratic. That's my gut feeling. It's a disgrace, and it reflects badly on the Johnson administration.